Welcome to the Startup Operator podcast. I'm your host, Roshan Karyappa, and I have with me today Arijit Chakraborty, who is the Managing Director Asia at Cover Genius. Cover Genius is one of the fastest growing insurtechs globally. It topped the Financial Times ranking for the Asia Pacific market this year, and their vision is to protect customers of the world's largest digital companies. Arijit is a lawyer by education and an insurance executive and startup operator by experience. We have plenty to talk to him about today on InsurTech, strategy, consulting for startups, and so on. So, without further ado, welcome Arijit. Thank you so much for being on the Startup Operator podcast.
Thank you, Roshan, for having me. It's been a pleasure being here in your podcast.
Yeah, great to have you. So, Arijit, let's talk about your journey a little bit. You've made multiple transitions, from legal to startups, from insurance to insurtech, and you've seen things from the lens of a founder and an executive. So, how would you summarize your journey and the learnings from these various transitions?
I think that's a fair question, Roshan, because there has been a lot of transitions in my career. I think that's predominantly because of the reason is that I like building companies rather than running them. So I'm very passionate about new ideas, venturing into those new ideas, growing businesses, rather than going into sort of an MNC setup where everything is established and my role is to continue with the business operations. And obviously there are challenges there, but it's not growth. I love that growth element and the growth mindset in on order to look at things. So as per my journey, as you pointed out, that I'm a lawyer by background, moved to Singapore about 14 years back. Actually, the reason I'm the lawyer by background because I'm a third generation lawyer in my family.
Oh,
One of my grandfather and father are senior counsels in senior advocate in India, and but they didn't want me to be a lawyer. They thought law was a dying profession. Okay, but I was
okay.
always passionate seeing our books library, the clients, everyone, and I wanted to venture into that. But as it turned out to be that I got more excited to be in corporate law rather than going into sort of the judiciary in India, where I did practice for like over a year in Supreme Court. That's how I started off my career. Then sort of moved to Singapore to study master in law in international business laws, but then was sent to Shanghai for an as an exchange student, and where I completed my master's. And at the same time, one of my papers got admitted in Harvard, so I went for a symposium, spent some time in New York and Boston. Around that time, Temasek Holdings, which is a sovereign wealth fund of Singapore, hired me as M&A counsel. I was at that point of time the only foreign legal counsel with Temasek and was involved in deals outside Singapore, so mainly Southeast Asia and India. So that's how my sort of working journey started in Singapore.
Right.
And then after about more than 3 years when I spent with Temasek, accidentally insurance happened. So I got into the insurance ecosystem, starting as an assistant general counsel, and when became a general counsel, hitting both legal and compliance functions. Again, what interested in me because in all these sort of insurance where I kind of started this department because they were having either legal separate and compliance separate, and I was kind of hired to merge the departments and sort of giving a new spin to the whole way they were doing or addressing the business. I will say sort of my career track happened sort of expanded quite fast, because again of a couple of reasons there. I think uh, and that's what the business feedback was. I was one of the most commercial lawyer by nature, because lawyers or compliance officer can sometimes get perceived to be roadblockers or highlighting red
Right.
flags and not providing solutions. Whereas me being commercial by nature, I always find ways to help business. So rather than being a blocker, I wanted to see how I can be a more enabler to the business, and that's the reason was invited to be the part of the senior management with brands like Zurich, and then my last corporate job was with Manulife. And especially with Manulife, I was involved in the DPS bank assurance, got a flavor of, strategy side of things, distribution, products, and everything. And that's where kind of, it happened. I think 4 years now. I was in my role in Manulife, and I saw that the world has moved out a lot in terms of blockchain and ICOs and bitcoins, and all these things were buzzwords at that point of time, 4 years back. And I found myself that, okay, I'm in a quite a cushy senior management role, but there is a lot happening outside to what I can do or I am being exposed to. And for me, the learning never stopped, right? So I wanted to get myself into this, unknown territory of the startup ecosystem and seeing what other people are doing. So I made a calculated move, incorporated, founded a consulting company called Arch. Um, Got myself actually a certificate from London School of Economics on blockchain and crypto. Advised a couple of ICOs, and that's how sort of I started my entrepreneur journey
Right.
on the consulting. So just to spend a bit of time on what I created is I created a one-stop platform where if you're looking at company incorporation and you are a new company, you need templated legal documents, you need regulatory advice or regulatory manuals, compliance manuals. Two, you need VC funding, then doing shareholders agreement and all that, and coming to recruitment licenses. So we provide all the services. Reason I did that because I saw if you're an entrepreneur, you are going and knocking at everyone's door in order to get various services. And sometimes
Right.
conventional providers, whether it's law firms or big four accounting firms or other people, do not cater to that ecosystem. That's why I wanted to create the platform so that it can benefit the entrepreneurs and the startups. So that's how I started my entrepreneur journey. And then, given my profile, a lot of insurtechs and fintech started showing interest in my profile. So I started getting involved in building companies and advising on building those companies. And that's how I've been doing it for the last 3.5 years. So we can spend more time on those previous companies, but I've built two companies, one from a complete like pre-series seed stage to a seed plus round, and another company which is more from seed capital to Series A plus capital.
Right.
Then got involved with Cover Genius to bring the brand into Asia, whether it was known for Western markets, but not. I mean, for the expansion, they needed someone to bring into Asia, and that's the challenge which I took, and it's been immensely both from a learning perspective and something which I could sort of grow with the team, which I sort of built up from the scratch to venture into this market.
Right.
Sorry, that's a
Fantastic.
pretty long introduction.
No, I mean, you've done plenty of things, and there are plenty of things that we can sort of deep dive into as well, blockchain, M&A, and so on. But I'd like to talk to you about your current role at Cover Genius. I mean, you've been here for about a year, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
What was it like transitioning from being a big company executive into this role, and then building this up and doing the 0 to 1 journey?
Well, so my last corporate job was 4 years back, right? Since then,
Okay.
I've been building companies which is from
Right.
pretty much from the scratch. So that exposure I already had. Now, if you see the challenge or the interesting part, it is that in MNC, sometimes your roles are defined. The way you're approaching things are defined, right? Where in a startup, everything is new. Whatever you create is your own value creation with the team. There are very less politics. Sometimes in MNC, sort of
Right.
politics creeps in, and what you're doing on a daily basis is doing stakeholder management. But here it's more about you have to get your hands dirty. You have to go for the product creation, the distribution, and all those things. So that's something which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Right.
So that's what I did. Cover Genius, in that sense, is a very good balance
Mhm.
between a startup which is already established but do not have legacy systems and processes what maybe a particular MNC or an insurance company will have.
Right.
Okay, so and it is something very impressive of the two founders, Gus and Chris, who built that for the last 6 years. It's predominantly a very solid product and tech company which looks for regional and global distribution partners. So I will say that there was a difference when I jumped from a corporate life to the startup ecosystem, which is completely building from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the startup to Cover Genius is a good balance where
Right.
I'm not building from the scratch, but I'm getting a brand into new markets.
Right.
So that's the difference.
Right. So, we've spoken a lot about InsurTech on the podcast itself. In fact, I mean, we had Shwetank on our podcast talking about InsurTech just a few episodes back, right? Uh, it seems like an interesting market from the outside, and there's plenty of action that's happening, right? As an operator within that space, if you could talk about a few defining characteristics of this market, that would be, valuable.
So InsurTech is the future of insurance. Okay, so predominantly I've seen that the large insurance companies, I haven't seen much of product differentiation. All the products pretty much look the same. There are obviously has been pockets of innovation, and then on the distribution side, millions of dollars get into bank assurance deals and then other large broker deals and your own tied agency, right? So when you have such a channel where you have invested millions, if not billion of dollars, then you are not looking at go to market or a direct to consumer digital channel, because there is a huge channel conflict already you have created for yourself,
Right.
because you have already invested so much of money. Where InsurTech is more coming up with insurance products which are simple, seamless, easy to understand, easy to buy. Claims process can be streamlined, instant payment, instant claims processing. So all these different value chain of insurance can be automated and can be put into the insurance ecosystem, because you as a consumer needs to benefit from what you are buying. And insurance to me is not a Apple product or a Samsung product which you can touch and feel. It's actually a piece of paper, which is a promise, which only you can experience when there is a claim. And unfortunately, most underwriters or insurance companies are obviously focusing on buying and selling and distribution, but not much in claims, right? So in a life insurance, it is still a really I don't know what's the right adjective to use, but
Yeah.
it's actually pretty painful. And
Mm.
I mean, for my personal story, recently actually I lost my father to COVID.
Oh, shucks.
So that was a
Sorry
huge
about that.
personal loss, but no, thanks, Roshan. But what I experienced is claiming through the insurance companies was a nightmare by itself, right? So
Right.
so that is something which needs to be improved. And InsurTech, um, given that how technology is enhancing the whole insurance offering and every part of the value chain, I
Mhm.
think is more important than before to look for it. And COVID obviously accelerated the whole proposition further than a conventional face-to-face meeting and buying insurance policies.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there is an undue focus on sales in insurance, right? I mean, you know what they say, insurance is sold, not bought. And there is not enough focus on product, on customer experience, and so on. Um, so, do you think conventionally the conventional sales and distribution systems itself will sort of get disrupted? Are you seeing that with digital and so on, or is there something fundamentally like flawed about the incentive structures, the products, something else that has to be fixed?
No, that's a good question, Roshan. See, every big insurance company has a customer centricity committee, and everyone also has an innovation lab. But there is a disconnect between those committees and those labs and sort of, the people who are running these companies.
Hmm.
Now, I feel that a lot of innovation do not happen again. As I said, it's a channel conflict, right? And the other piece is, if you look at a KPI of a CEO, if you look at a bank or any financial institution, okay, you have a leader who is a CEO who actually gets deployed for 3 years in a particular role.
Mm.
Okay, In that 3 years, that person needs to obviously run an operation under a particular cost, reduce the cost, increase the sales, and that person then moves on to another role.
Correct.
Right? So if you look at this, and this is actually, a lot of people don't talk about it, but if you look at this is one of the fundamental problems. Because if you're not looking at a long term, like when you're building a startup, it's your baby, you doing whatever is necessary, right? But if your target is a 3-year good individual success, and then let me move to the other role, the company also is driven by that. So you will not invest money, which is more on, let me do technology enhancement because it's a burn to the company, or let me try out a new thing, because if the conventional thing is working, let's continue with that. Now, whether digital will be a disruption, the answer is yes and no. Yes and no, because simple non-life products obviously can be distributed digitally. But when you come to complex life products, whether it is universal life, whether it is ILPs, that is very difficult to distribute online, because you need a human intervention. You
Financial
need someone
advisor.
who can explain to you that why this product is suitable, what is your insurance gap, what we call is financial sort of gap analysis and a product gap analysis, and then push the product. Where the model is faulty, and I'm not blaming all insurance intermediaries there, but I have personally experienced um, big insurance intermediary or a broker, without naming that broker, coming up with an Excel spreadsheet where you have underwriters in the top column, and then at the right you have all the products. So universal life from insurance X gives me this commission, ILP from insurance Y gives this commission. Then they negotiate with the insurance company who pays a higher commission. Then they go out to push that product to the consumer, irrespective of whether that product is suitable for the end consumer or not. And when you highlighted this fault, I do see this as a fault. And I'm not saying everyone is doing that, but this is something is there. A lot of people are buying this long-term life insurance products, not knowing actually what they're paying for or what they're buying.
This episode is brought to you by Mulya. You want to move fast? Sure. But without breaking things? Now that's a hard ask. The thing is, once you have some base of users and customers, you just cannot afford to risk quality. So how do the likes of Cred, Swiggy and Curefit, some of India's fastest growing startups, ship at lightning pace and delight their users and customers? Simple, they're working with Mulya as a strategic quality partner. Mulya is India's most talented and passionate community of testers. They've helped prevent thousands of bugs and regression issues. So as a CTO or a product owner, if you want to reduce tech debt, especially while you scale, do check out Mulya.com. I've interviewed Mulya's founder and CEO Pradeep on the podcast earlier, and we spoke about how startups can improve quality while scaling and things to that effect. You should definitely check it out. I'll link to it in the description below. Now back to your regular programming. Right. So, you rightly mentioned that, insurtechs are the future. What are some challenges of operating within this insurance ecosystem itself from a startup and a business building perspective?
Yeah, so to give you this answer, let me sort of talk back to what Cover Genius is doing as a business, and then maybe I'll go to sort of the challenges from there.
Sure.
Okay. So Cover Genius, because why I wanted to highlight that, because a lot of insurtechs are of different nature. So let's start with that maybe. There are insurtechs who are helping to digitize the legacy systems of an insurance company. Okay. Then there are insurtechs who have become an aggregator. Policybazaar to be one good example. Okay. Then there are insurtechs who are into like a direct to consumer channel. So they have become digital brokers. Okay. You have a direct to consumer, you take by like complicated product bite size, you can buy from their portal. So that's another one. And then you have full stack B2B insurtech companies, which Cover Genius is in that space. Right. So exactly what we are doing is we enable large online distributors, whether it can be e-commerce, OTAs, neobanks, SME platforms, and all these distribution, to enable them with an insurance product as an in-path journey, which is contextual to the primary purchase.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you're buying a air ticket in a OT or airline, we are then available at the checkout to buy travel insurance to cover the air ticket or the tour. If
Got it.
you are opening a bank account in a new bank, we are available to sell you a bite-size health insurance plan or something which is contextual to your business. We have partnerships with guys like Intuit, which is QuickBooks,
Hmm.
where if you are buying an accounting software, we are pushing you an SME solution. Okay, or we are looking at e-commerce, like we have partnership like with eBay or Shopee, where you're buying a product or an electronic laptop, and we are providing a product warranty at the checkbox. So whatever primary purchases, we are providing a protection to cover that. Now, to answer your question, why I think that's a future is because insurance shouldn't feel like, okay, I bought this, now I'm coming to a conventional distribution channel to
Hmm.
protect my risk. That whole distribution is shifting towards, I am in this e-commerce platform, ride hailing platform, OTA platform on a daily basis,
Right.
and I'm buying this product services. I just want a unbundled protection cover to cover that particular risk for that particular time. So it is usage based, specific bundle insurance cover. I
Right.
think the distribution is moving towards that because you don't need a holistic, maybe a comprehensive travel plan to cover you anymore.
Right.
So
Yeah.
maybe your credit card does that. You need something which is parametric flight dealing, for example,
Right.
right? So things like that. So that's where I think Cover Genius is. We operate in more than 60 countries and in 50 states. Given an example, let's take one of our anchor partner, Booking Holdings.
Hmm.
We cover Booking Holdings in 60 countries. So whether you are in Indonesia, Mexico, India, or US, your consumer experience is consistent when you are buying that product. But underlying, we have underwriters on individual markets giving you the policy.
Right.
So it's kind of buying a Google product or entering into a McDonald's anywhere in the world. Your experience is consistent. So that's what we
Hmm.
do as a platform. Our experience is consistent, and our claims experience is also consistent.
Right.
And we have digitized the claims processing, and that's why we boast sort of a NPS, which is on north of 65. It hovers around 65 to 70, where
Right.
in my insurance days, our KPIs to have an NPS which is negative 15 to negative 5. So that is the difference in how sort of customers see us as well.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's, yeah, what you're saying is like, extremely seamless, extremely contextual. The customer doesn't really feel like, they're even buying insurance. They're just buying protection and, simplifying the claims process because usually, I mean, dealing with the claims process, as you rightly mentioned, is super opaque. It's painful, a lot of to and fro and back and forth and so on, right? Which is reflected in the NPS as well. Let's shift our gaze to go to market and so on because one of the things that I've noticed is you're really good at business building, as you rightly mentioned. That's one of your passions, right? uh, a lot of Indian startups are looking to expand in Southeast Asia and APAC markets, right? Because indeed there are a lot of similarities between India and Indonesia, for example, or Vietnam or Singapore and elsewhere, right? Few differences, but a lot of similarities. What is your advice to an Indian startup that's looking to expand into these geographies?
Okay. The first and the foremost, Roshan, whether it is Indian startups or startups in the Western markets coming into Southeast Asia people consider this as a cluster, but in reality, all these countries are very different from each other.
Hmm.
Whether it's Indonesia, and I pick the four like the countries, which is you have your Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Philippines. Okay. Um, Now, other countries are also doing well. If you look at Bangladesh, is doing exceptionally well, but obviously digitization needs to catch up. But
Hmm.
as the economy, it's doing quite well. Uh, but if we focus on these four countries, each or each country has its own cultural sentiments towards business, own nuances, own regulatory framework, and own ways of doing business. What works in Indonesia doesn't necessarily work in Thailand.
Right.
So the first and the foremost thing is to understand the nuances between these markets. It's not that a product can be fit to a Southeast Asia community. It's very different from each other. Okay. And that's one. And the second thing is, and to understand the nuances, you need to understand the, again, if you're in the fintech, insurtech space, you need to understand the regulatory framework, what is allowed, what is not allowed.
Right.
Because a lot of regulations haven't caught up to the new innovations which is happening in the fintech, insurtech side. And when things haven't caught up, a lot of things stays on a gray zone, and a lot of regulators may take a conservative position. So you don't want that your idea or the product gets killed because you haven't done that, the analysis. Now, how to approach? My advice would be, the key advice, or the key thing which I feel is very important, is hire the right talent. Because when you're entering the market, don't try to enter the market just by yourself with having no knowledge of the market itself. Hire an expert which knows this market very well. So if you're going in Thailand, get a Thai speaking country manager, okay, who understands the regulatory nuances, who understands the network, who can reach out to other people. Because you, an Indian entrepreneur going into Thailand and trying to do it themselves, and getting a right talent out of Thailand, which is again, Southeast Asia cost wise is actually cheaper than India, talent wise. If you pick up the right person, that's how you will accelerate. Not by you trying to go into, and especially for Western markets, right? Cover Genius could have also Cover Genius, other companies also could have just tried to enter the market by themselves, but they saw in merit of sort of building a team here, which is like getting me and getting the team from the scratch, who has the domain expertise to build it to where they want to see it, right? So that is very important, is the hiring the right talent, and then understanding market nuances, understanding the regulatory framework, and then go and enter the market.
Right. Yeah, it's a great point that you mentioned, right? You can't really copy paste whatever you're doing here across these geographies and hope that it'll work. You really have to invest in localization, and that's been my experience as well over the last couple of years, at least. Do you want to talk about growing through partnerships in these regions? There are plenty of consulting partners, software system integrators, and so on and so forth. Any experience of working with these folks as well to grow your to expand into these markets?
I use channel partners for Cover Genius as well. So people who are in the consulting world, whether it's the usual big four consulting and other consultants. As a startup, again, you depending on where you are in your process, right? If you have already a Series A or Series B company and you can shell out money on a success fee basis or a retainer basis on a consultant who is working more to open doors for you, obviously then you are in a good position. But a lot of entrepreneurs are not in that position, right? So then rather than going with the top consultants or tier 1, tier 2, it makes sense to maybe partner with an individual who has a network within the market and work on a successful basis for that person to open the door, or that person to come and get an advisory position in your company to grow you.
Right.
I think that's how, because obviously as an entrepreneur, you'll be concerned about a burn. So you don't want to do a extremely expensive hire if you are analyzing one market. So the best way I feel is, again, find the right person who can help you to open doors. And that doesn't mean it has to be a tier 1, tier 2 consultancy firm.
Right.
It doesn't mean you have to hire the person and get the person under the payroll. So
Right.
there are ways to enter the market.
Right. Yeah. In fact, getting those tier 1 consulting firms to kind of prioritize you as well would be a huge challenge.
Of
right?
course. Yeah.
So, these two ecosystems, right? Whether you know the APAC startup ecosystem or Southeast Asia startup ecosystem and the India startup ecosystem, what are some contradictions in this? You know, what are some things that an Indian founder may find sort of counterintuitive when expanding into this market, and what is something that he or she has to be prepared for?
I think the main thing is evaluating your competition.
Hmm.
If you look at the countries, right? China is obviously way ahead in terms of digitization their economy. Okay. Now India obviously is in the second place. Actually, India is, I will say, in my experience, is more advanced digitally than other Southeast Asia markets. I'm not talking about Hong Kong, Singapore, but the
Hmm.
other sort of developing countries within.
Right.
Reason being, again, with obviously infamous demonetization, but obviously it forced us to adopt wallets and e-money and online transfers and bank accounts. So
Mhm.
obviously the financial inclusion happened because of that, and
Right.
because of the digitization, um, it has got a leapfrog over sort of other nations. But now your question is mainly about what is the difference between the two, right?
Right.
So you might be so again there is so before I answer that, I want to make this comment that a lot of entrepreneurs or founders fall into the trap of either FOMO
Mhm.
or what you call a herd mentality, right? So that's why you will see a mushroom growth of P2P lending platforms in Indonesia.
Right.
And at the end, there would be some level of consolidation. So few people will survive, few people will not, few people will sort of buy each other. So there would be a consolidation. So I will say to first of all to the Indian entrepreneurs is don't get caught into. Obviously if it's insurance, if it's banking, if it's other like industries where there is a huge potential to grow, and
Hmm.
maybe 1,000 people can coexist, like 1,000 companies can coexist, and you have a good value prop in your product, then you should consider that. But let's not go by, okay, this guy has done Policy Bazaar and aggregators work, let me start with another aggregator, because I know about minimum five entrepreneurs started aggregators and they closed after one year or 2 years.
Right.
So when you look at one, you don't see that, okay, I can build another Policy Bazaar, right? So
Right.
there are a lot of considerations which go into that. Or I want to like build another ride hailing, for example. Okay, because you
Right.
have to look how overcrowded that industry has already become,
Right.
and whether you have to analyze the competition very thoroughly. Then you come up with an idea, come up with a product proposition, then look at your competition in the other markets. So maybe India, because of the whole consumer base, that product is doing well.
Hmm.
But is the product fit to Singapore? May not be, because you are then deviating from a 1.4 billion population to 5.4 million population,
Right.
and that product may not be suitable from a scaling perspective.
Right.
So so there are companies, I mean, I don't know where they are. There are companies I've seen, you can withdraw cash, not from an ATM, but from any department store.
Hmm.
I think it can work in Indonesia, Thailand, India, as an example, because you may not have the accessibility to an ATM.
Hmm.
But I don't see this value prop in Singapore,
True. Right.
right? So even though there is a product market fit in your home country, that doesn't mean in other country it will work. And also you have to look at the competition in that space.
Right. So, let's shift our attention to your work with Arch. A lot of what you mentioned on the go-to-market side and everything, it's very clear you're coming from a very consulting mindset, right? I mean, be mindful of what market, be mindful of your channel, and so on and so forth. Um, what are some legal and compliance 101s for startups? I mean, what should they absolutely do? What should they absolutely avoid?
Okay. First thing they should do, and this is from my personal experience, it can be a group of friends coming up with an idea. They get into start a company, incorporate a company, register a company, um, came up with a product design and everything. 6 months, 1 year down the line, they haven't done the basic hygiene in terms of the legal documentation. Like they don't have even a shareholders agreement. They haven't put ESOP structure in place. And when they go to a level when maybe they want to get external funding, their share cap or the table is a mess. And then the co-founders fight with each other in terms of how much shareholding they should have into the company. So the first and the basic thing is to get your facts right. Your facts right is where you are registering this company. Okay, what you should be your holding company structure, because there is a tax difference, right? If you're having for example, a Singapore holdco, there are a lot of tax incentives compared to an Indian holdco. And if you're looking at external funding from China, Southeast Asia, it makes sense to have a Singapore holdco rather than an Indian holdco, because there is no capital gain tax, there is no dividend tax and all that.
Right.
So those aspects you have to see is first is your structure, how you are structuring the company. Okay. Second piece is whether you have placed the basic hygiene documents there, like a basic shareholders agreement, or if the friends and family around you are looking at a subscription agreement, whether you have looked at two different classes of shares, like ordinary shares, preference shares, and all those things. Those hygienes needs to put in place. That is basic. That is basic, and that's where sort of Arch also helps out, is giving you templated documents for fraction of a price than a law firm will charge to build this documents, because it is created as a platform to help entrepreneurs.
Right.
Okay, so whether you want to incorporate a company in Singapore, whether you want a basic skeleton, shareholders agreement, ESOP structures, anything you are looking for, like funding agreements and all those things, basic NDAs, employment contract, vendor contracts, partnership. Actually, we created templates for that, so that you can just use it and customize to your benefit. That's why it's fraction of price, which works for you. So that's one.
Right.
What people shouldn't do, I think a lot of people over engineer stuff.
Right.
For example, they want to go big from day one. I won't advise that. I mean, if you're super confident on your product and yourself, yes. But if you're not, start small, experiment. You might be passionate about the product, but you haven't checked the market, whether that market is responding to your product.
Right.
A lot of entrepreneurs fail in that, because I've seen, because I run a small consortium. We also make some small angel investments. And what we have seen is a lot of entrepreneurs get very emotional about their product, and they cannot detach themselves from there. So if you ask or questions which is the entrepreneur doesn't want to hear, then they get very defensive, because
Right.
they're emotionally attached to it. And that is a big problem. Obviously, you need to be passionate to what you're doing, but there is a thin line between being emotionally attached, so they are close to external feedback. And the second thing is you actually seeking feedback and improving your product, or you are
Right.
seeking feedback, or maybe you consider and you said, like, I know better. That's also fine, but you need to consider that. So that is where sometimes people go wrong, is getting too emotionally attached, try to do a big bang, and then realize that maybe it's not a product market fit, or the pricing is not right or anything. So
Right.
that's one of the things I've seen.
So, legal and compliance is sort of a cost center, right? I mean, and most startups tend to outsource this function to, organizations, partners outside of their own. So, what are some things that entrepreneurs have to keep in mind while picking a partner for legal and compliance?
I think you need to find a firm or an individual which understands your growth journey, right? It cannot be this usual time cost consulting by a law firm. It won't work. Okay. You need a firm which obviously has a domain expertise, but it's more about understanding your business and understanding the solution you need and catering to that solution. Because what you don't need, see, there is a difference again with MNC hiring law firms and startup hiring law firms.
Okay.
Sometimes MNCs hire law firms to cover a particular risk. Okay, so I'm doing this deal. Give me an opinion that regulatory wise, I'm okay. So I'm okay to get actually a 25-page memo on, the history and the risk, and I'm evaluating the risk. But if you're a startup, your go-to market is very critical, right? So you don't need a 25 page memo. What you need is a solution to your problem. Okay, so you need to identify the firm who actually can give you the solution, and then will you pay for it. Otherwise, don't pay for it. A lot of firms can tell you the legal position. You can research your own legal position, right? But so the firm you should pay who is giving you the solution, number one. Number two is what we provide. Like, go for a firm which provides you with this templated document so that you don't start building them. Like, you can outsource for a fee, you can get all your compliance manuals done, you can get all your legal agreements done, and once you are done, you don't have to do more about it, right? It's a one time exercise. And then with growth, you need more advisors. I think that's where you can keep your engagement with lawyers short, and you can focus more on your business.
Right. So don't hire a typical, law firm, whatever, which does, time and material consulting.
Yeah,
Find someone who works with startups and who's more strategically aligned to your vision, right? Um,
absolutely.
so one of the final questions, we're coming towards the end of the podcast. We're operating in the times of COVID, and Asia has been sort of resilient, right? I mean, we've seen global funds, rush back to Indonesia. We've seen inflows in India as well. What are some things that you're optimistic for from a business front in these markets, in Southeast Asia and India and so on?
I think COVID has accelerated digitization for sure.
Right.
There is a joke which goes circles in LinkedIn that what helped you to digitize the company? Is it your new CTO, new CEO, or COVID? And the answer is COVID, right?
Right.
Because it has just pushed people to come out of their comfort zone and see how you can digitally engage your consumers. Okay,
Right.
so that has accelerated. So Asia was anyways on the forefront than the Western markets in terms of digitalization. US separate. I'm talking more on Europe and other parts
Right.
of the world. So that has happened. That will grow more. So e-commerce will pick up. When travel comes back, obviously the OTA business also will pick up, but it will take some time. But generally, anything which is more towards embedded finance in a digital ecosystem, that will be the future. So Cover Genius is also in the embedded finance business, right? Because you are buying again a core product digitally, and we are present there to protect you. Or there is a Stripe which is present there to make your payments receivable or payable easier, right? So that is what is going to be the future, which has more accelerated because of COVID. I really hope that we get some learnings out of the COVID from a environmental protection perspective. I
Right.
never, I never ever looked at. There is. Did you get background noise of my kid?
Yeah, I'll edit it out. Don't worry.
You can. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so in terms of COVID, what has happened is I lost my chain of thought.
You were talking about environmental impact.
Yeah, environmental impact, that I was never an advocate of commuting to office to do a particular work.
Hmm.
Okay, so you can be productive anywhere. And I like, so Cover Genius has work from anywhere culture. I love this flexibility, and my entire team globally, we are
Hmm.
150 people actually, we work from anywhere. And that is where I
Fantastic.
think the whole element of waking up in the morning, getting ready, commuting to work, and then spending 6 hours, and then looking forward for your 5 p.m., 6 p.m. coming back, it never inspired me, right?
Right.
I mean, I really hope after the COVID, people feel that the digital interface works.
Hmm.
That's how business can be done, and that's how you put less pressure on environment, whether it's commercial buildings or your car carbon emission and all those things, and go more, which is more towards the digital way, more towards what is suitable for you. Have the I think this digitization also gives you is the extreme flexibility and options to choose multiple things, but at the same time keep that human touch balance, right? It
Right.
cannot be that I'm fixated with my phone and I'm not talking to my spouse who is sitting beside me, right? So that needs to be the balance. But I feel COVID obviously has been really bad for the global economy and infrastructure. A lot of people have died. I have my huge personal loss.
Right.
But I think we should all learn from there and have more sensitive towards the environment, and also going towards more empathy and more sort of digitization, but while having a human touch.
Right. Yeah, wonderful. Final question, before we let you go, any books or podcasts that you would recommend to our listeners?
Any books?
Books or
Uh,
podcasts, any of them?
uh, well, just I just bought 3 books which I'm currently reading. One is Death by Sadhguru.
Right.
One is Code of Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Lakhani, the founder of Mind Valley. And one is Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty.
Right. Interesting.
And I think as a podcast, if there is a people wants to learn more about startups, and obviously people should follow you.
Thank you so much.
And if you're looking at InsurTech podcast, I've done a couple of podcasts in the past. I think these guys are doing good job. AIP, they are doing a good job on the podcast. But if you're looking at more overall, I'm a bit of philosophical person by nature. I think
Sure.
a lot of things you can also get from following Sadhguru or Jay Shetty podcasts as well.
Right. Fantastic. All right, Arijit, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I certainly learned a lot of things about InsurTech, about expanding into Southeast Asia markets and so on. Thank you so much, Arijit. Look forward.
Thank you, Roshan, for having me, and it was great conversing with you and sharing my thoughts.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, then don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite platform and share this episode with all of your fellow startup operators. Also, follow the Startup Operator on LinkedIn and Twitter for more updates. Stay safe, take care, and see you soon on a brand new episode of the Startup Operator.